Welcome back on the AM show, and we get into our big stories. Now, we're going to be contemplating the influence of the smaller political parties in Ghana and how their influence appears to be waning over time. If you look at the elections we've had all the way from 1996 till now, and there's a reason I'm starting from 96, you would realize that waning effect. Now, the question is, what does election 2024 hold for these minority parties who seem to have suffered at the expense of the two big political parties, the MPP and the NDC, who have often gobbled up all the votes? Records indicate that since the inception of multi-party democracy, smaller parties have not made anything more than 2% of the total votes cast. Well, in some instances, about 3%. In one instance, in the year 2000, thereabouts 7%, or just about 2004. Now, the question, the 2024 elections, are they going to present to us a different scenario, the smaller parties, than before? What can change, and are there any different strategies to deploy to change the status quo? We get into these matters with our guests this morning, and we have Nana Ohene Ntow. He's senior advisor to Alan Chebateng. He joins the conversation. We also have Dr. John Osai-Kwapong. He's a CDD fellow, and we have our very own Nana Acheampong, who has been with us since morning, and she's still here with us. She'll also be joining the conversation from that perspective. But let's kickstart matters with some data we've put together for you. We'll walk you through them, and then we shall take it from there in respect of what we can expect ahead of the 2024 elections. Now, if you look at the emerging competitors, you can see the likes of the Yellow Ghana, New Vision Movement, the New Force, and the Movement for Change. All of these gunning to make an impact as far as the smaller or minority parties are concerned. Now, if you go to the next slide, then we'll take a look at the impact of other parties in terms of the votes garnered between 1996 and 2020. You would realize that the total votes of other parties put together in 96, you were looking at 214,000. In the year 2000, 473,000, the highest they have mustered. Then you go to 2004, a decline, 251,000, 248,000 in 2008, and since that time, it has been less than 200,000. In 2020, a paltry 175,000 going to the smaller parties, all put together. Then you look at the impact of these other parties in the 2020 elections, and you would find out that if you took the winning party, the MPP, in that election, 51.3%, the NDC, 47.36%, a gap of about 4%, and all the other parties put together contributed only 1.32%. But then, in terms of runoffs, what has been the impact? If you look at the year 2000, the MPP securing 48.4% of the votes, the NDC 44.8%, the other parties garnering 6.7%. That was a highlight. But then you come to the year 2008, and while there was still a standoff, 49.32% for the MPP and 47.76% for the NDC, leading to that subsequent contest in which the late John Evans Atta Mills would win, the other parties put together secured just 2.91%. If you look at the gap in there, almost a 4% difference in terms of what they got in 2000 versus what they got in 2008. But if you delve further into the data, you would see that in terms of the share of total valid votes between 1996 and 2020, in 1996, the share or the impact of other parties stood at 3%, highest being in 2000, like I mentioned earlier, 6.7%, almost 7%, and trickling down all the way to 2020 with 1.32%. You would see that 2020 was the worst performance of these parties comparatively. Then we go to our next slide, and then you would note, if you look at the share of votes who has been behind those votes. You would see the faces there as well. We'll bring you that shortly. But you would see the representatives. I mean, you look at 2008, for example, a crucial year. You'd see Papa Kwesi Indum and the impact he had, just 0.59%. In the year 2004, Edward Nasigri Mahama, 1.96%. Then there was also Edward Mahama again in 2000, 2.5%. And again, in the year 1996, 3%. But you look at the dwindling fortunes, and it is clear that something has not been working, especially from the year 2000 for these smaller parties. Now, if you look at that third force, and what if there's a breakaway or breakaways performance in general elections, 2000 to now, when we get there, you would notice that John Acheampong secured 48.2% of the votes. Of course, in 2000, John Atta Mills, 44.5%. Guzitano of the NRP, 1.2%. And Charles Rekubrobe of the UGM, United Ghana Movement, 0.3%. But we have a few more slides that we'll share with you, and then we can run with it. Then you take a look at the performance in general elections 2008. Nana Akufo-Addo securing 49.32%, John Evans Atta Mills 47.76%, and probably one of the best performers in there, Emmanuel Ansa Entry of the DFP, 0.33%. If you go further and you take a snapshot of 2016, and we're just taking different years, 2000, 2008, and now 2016, 8-year cycles, to find out how these smaller parties have fared. You would see that while Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo was polling 53.9%, John Mahama polling 44.4%. In that year, you would have the likes of Nana Konadu Adjaman Rawlings polling 0.16%. And that was the tail of the tape for many of these smaller political parties. So we ask this morning, as we confer with our guests, what can be the impact of these smaller parties, these individuals stepping up to go to the electorate for their vote? Our guests are in the studio. Let me just confirm that we have Dr. John Osai-Kwapong with us. Doc, good morning.
Good morning, Benjamin.
It's good to have you join the conversation.
Thank you.
So let's start off with these smaller parties and what you forecast their influence could be. Looking at the patterns, you've observed this, you've followed this. What can likely be the impact of these smaller political parties in election 2024? And you can feel free to give your basic, your background views before we get to specifics.
Sure. So good morning again, and good morning to everyone else on the show. If you look at the patterns, if you look at their historical performance since 1996, and just as your data, the slides that you showed portray, my initial inclination is that pattern is likely to continue in 2024. It's interesting how multi-party democracies that particularly use this first past the post system of voting and who wins at the poll end up having most of the time two major political parties that end up dominating the political landscape, and that's what you see having emerged in Ghana. I mean, since their best performance combined, as your graphs showed, of about 6-point-something% in 2000 round one, you just see that they've not been able to pull more than a combined 2% of the vote since then, especially in the last two elections, which is what leads me to say that I'm not sure how the 2024. I'm not certain that the 2024 election would back that trend and change the picture in a very dramatic way from what we've been seeing.
I see. Thank you very much, Dr. Ohene Ntow, for those initial thoughts. Let me bring in Nanaya. You've been on the political field. You've had quite a bit of experience with the CPP, among others, and you have seen, if I dare say so, how poorly the smaller political parties have fared. And she's giving me the look. Yes, how poorly the smaller political parties have fared, including the CPP. Now, what would be your fundamental views about why these smaller political parties are not performing? Are you going to give me that look again? Nanaya.
Greetings to my big brother. When you put me against my big brother,
Oh, we are not pitching you against your big brother. It's a debate. It's a debate we're having.
Discussion. Yeah, so
yes.
I have a problem when everybody says smaller parties.
It's about the chunk of votes they get.
I mean, that cannot define a party, because when we are going to the polls and we are paying for the fees at EC, we all pay 100,000 for presidential, 10,000 for parliamentary.
In other jurisdictions, in the US and others, the Tea Party, the Green parties, they are smaller parties. They are referred to as smaller parties.
If we are small, then the EC should consider reducing our fees, because if you are small at home, you don't pay the same as your elder brother.
Okay.
So if you people think we are small, all of us are small, then the fees should be reduced so that the bigger ones will pay more and we will pay less. As long as we pay the same, as long as we have the same requirements as in law, we are not small.
But when we look at your performance in elections, what does that make you?
That is neither here nor there. I don't think that should be the indicator or the parameter to indicate whether, say whether somebody is small or big.
Okay.
Now, what is happening? You see, when we look at the graph, you notice that changes started coming around 2008 when we started dropping. Very abysmal.
So in 1996, it wasn't a bad performance. In 2000, that was the highest performance. You remember when
yes,
there was that
but your graph
rerun?
Your graph is not taking account of the rerun. That these smaller parties that you are seeing, these other parties, help the MPP to come to power.
Yes, that's why I'm mentioning 2000.
Yes, the 2000. Yes, the rerun.
In 2000, there was that influence. And that is where you see a percentage difference of almost 7%.
7.6%.
Which is what those smaller parties put together.
All the other parties put together, and we're able to help a bigger party, so-called bigger party, to come to power.
That was when we had the Grand Coalition, right? That was in 1996 rather, not 2000.
No. Right. 2000, we came together during the second round to help His Excellency Kufuor win the.
But it was 2000 that you had the
highest number.
You say since that time there has been a drop. Indeed, there has.
Yes.
The closest the smaller parties have come to getting anything close to that is 2.7 something percent, almost 3%.
It dropped drastically. I think that we should also look at who is promoting whom. Because the media is always fixated on MPP, NDC. I remember when I was General Secretary of CPP, I used to fight with the media all the time. I have that leverage because I'm a media person. But the media would always concentrate on MPP, NDC. For instance, even today, we have Honorable Lanche Martin also in the fray. I see that it's as if he is not anywhere. Do you get me?
But that is precisely why we have Ohene Ntow with us today.
It's not common these days.
And we know, for example, that tomorrow he's having a press engagement at the Coconut Grove Hotel.
It's only when he has a press engagement.
We know these things and we get involved.
But when it's MPP, somebody speaks up. Look at this Bryan Acheampong, the Agric minister. Look at the things that he's saying. It's headlines. everywhere. What he's saying is not pleasant.
Very negative.
Very negative. The person, anytime that he's intoxicated with emotion and some...
He's intoxicated with emotion.
Yes, when he's there with the people, he gets intoxicated with emotion. And he starts speaking, and immediately it is all over the place. That is what we are talking about.
But to be fair to us, you do understand that these two political parties, they are political juggernauts. They do so many things, and a lot of what they do... hold for me. A lot of what they do in their campaigning and otherwise is newsworthy. I'll ask, say, the smaller... hold for me. I'll ask, I'm not saying so, but how many times would you see some of the smaller parties doing something where some of the other parties doing things where we would have to go? When Cheddar came through with this and that and the initial bit
Cheddar is not a party.
we gave them attention.
We need to dichotomize
when the smaller parties, Alan Chemating, when he does things, we are there.
You see the way...
Now Ohene Ntow will make mention of that. But if you are not doing the same things that the bigger political parties would do, or on that same scale, you can't expect us to be everywhere.
No, you have to help us grow. It's a democracy. Because we all pay 100,000 when we are going to have the elections. The point is that we should also look at the monetization of our politics. The monetization of our politics has an impact on how the other parties perform. Do you get me? These days, and politics is democracy is expensive. We have legal costs and illegal costs. To rent a canopy, to take transports, to do all manner of things is money. That is legal cost. To even rent offices all over the country, which is a requirement, 2/3. The party should have 2/3 within the space. Representation. It is money. Do you get me? Even a party flags, T-shirts, everything is cash. Do you understand? So in my view, I believe that there should be a way that there's a level playing field. You realize that these two political parties, NDC and MPP, we are trying to make our nation a duopoly, which is not.
I see.
It is not, because there are other political parties. But the issue here is that and nobody is even, because it is very good for our democracy if we had other players who are as competent.
We all agree to that. But the question is whether the other parties are pulling their weight. You've mentioned a matter that I'll delve into later about how political parties are funded in our country and what support we can give to other parties, especially beyond the two juggernauts, NPP and NDC.
President Kufuor did something when he was in power. Immediately he came on board. He brought on board some people from all the other parties to be with him. And if that had continued, maybe would have given us some leverage. Number two, do you know GUM? Nobody mentions.
So make that your final point so I can bring in.
GUM got 100,000.
Indeed. We made mention of it. If you look at his...
I didn't see GUM there. Is he there?
Is it the Ghana Union movement? Oh, I think it was rather the UG.
But whoever thought that GUM would get over 100,000? He did. So it means that there is hope for the other parties in the right situation. Under
the right circumstances.
Yes.
We'll get into other bits, but I just want to find out from you, Nana Ohene Ntow, the bit about, do you also disagree with being referred to as smaller parties, or do you have a take on that?
Those are stereotypes that sometimes the media feeds into. But before I even get to the real issue, let me note a little thing that, Joy, you've done this morning that I have to protest and get it
what is
corrected immediately. Where you chose to put the butterfly against the white background when our color is yellow, we have a yellow army, and then you decided, not even the Electoral Commission, Joy FM decided that the butterfly should be against a white background and some other group calling itself a yellow whatever should be a yellow background. That is a decision you took, and I think it's arbitrary. It goes against our campaign.
No, you need to. Sorry.
Yeah. Wait. Let me just finish with that. So, this is a very arbitrary and very unfair decision that you would have taken. Everybody in this country knows. And all the things that Alan Acheampong has done, including this book that I have here, all the yellow T-shirts everywhere, everything that Movement for Change has done has been in yellow. And then Joy FM decides that if they want to present the logo of Alan Acheampong's Movement for Change, it has to be against a white background. So having said that, I hope by the time we finish, you will put it against a yellow background.
Well, it's not that simple. It's our graphics people who do these things.
These very
and let me just say that this is Joy News. There was no such intent. When our graphics people
maybe
do
you may
these
not
things,
intend it, but it can also have some subtle. We are in
Just
in
say
the
sorry
business.
and let's
right?
move on.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. But I have to explain to him that it wasn't. There was no intent.
Well, yes, I can agree
behind
with
it.
you. I can understand, but I'm sure your graphics people will be listening.
Yes.
So they should immediately go to work.
But they know the colors of MPP and NDC.
Exactly.
They won't make that mistake.
Exactly. So
That's what we are
actually,
talking
if you,
about.
but anyway,
if you look at the data we have here, no such
having said
shows
that,
anyway.
because
Let's
you
go
see, for the ballot paper, the logo for independence, and the new person on the ballot, the logo and the recognition of the face and color. These are the key things. Yeah.
But
So
let me,
if anybody does anything to try and detract or to take away from it, then you need to...
Let me find out from you, though, going into the elections, because there's yellow Ghana that, just finding out.
Yes.
Your shade of yellow is not your usual... It's a different shade, isn't it?
I don't want to get into the technicalities.
No. You're talking about elections and the coloring. And I'm asking you, what is your shade of yellow?
I cannot get into... I'm not a graphics person. I just...
Okay. All right.
So I don't want to get into an area...
The shade of yellow is in the book.
Yeah. I don't know what shade of yellow...
It looks more amber-like than...
Well, I am saying
yellow.
This is a graphics thing. But I know it's yellow. That's all. So
all right.
If
that's fine.
the experts get to the point where they need to differentiate, then they will do that.
All right.
But having said that, I certainly will not disagree with the experts who are saying that it is an uphill task for any independent coming into the elections of 2024. And that when you look at the statistics, you cannot discount statistics. I mean, these are figures that I'm sure would have come out of research and a lot of experience and all of the data that we are all looking at. But interestingly, the dynamics that are emerging, not just in Ghana, but around the world, will show that when people get tired, when people get fed up with a certain status quo, certain dynamics moving for change begin to emerge.
In so engineer.
Pardon me?
In so engineer.
Oh, you see, I don't think that in our own political experience, especially within the Fourth Republic, there has been any time when a broad section of voters, and Ghanaians generally, are asking for a change beyond MPP NDC than now. I don't know whether you have heard this, whether you picked the vibe. In fact, I did ask one of the key posters in town that you're always polling about MPP NDC and then the other new factors, Alan Acheampong showing up. Why don't you deal with the issue of whether people also want change? Just test it.
But some of them are polling on that.
Yes.
And we see, for example, Global Info Analytics, and if you follow their data points, you would see that especially in the Ashanti and Eastern regions, some trends are emerging. What we are not seeing is too much beyond those regions, but especially in the Ashanti and Eastern regions, trends are developing.
So that immediately tells you that Ghana is getting to the point where, as I said, I respect statistics a lot. And as an academic and a social researcher myself, you can never discount statistics. But you also have to deal with certain very significant social dynamics that are emerging around this time. Now, when Alan Acheampong broke away from the NPP and launched the Movement for Change, the Afro-Franto movement, he was derided and laughed at, mocked so seriously especially by top leading members of the NPP. Some didn't even give his movement 2 weeks to survive. And they said, look, how long is the lifespan of a butterfly? Forgetting that these are mere symbols. Symbols that have both cultural, philosophical, and other significance. I mean, if you talk about the MPP's elephant, for example, it's a symbol representing something. And that's what you want to understand. When Alan Acheampong chose the butterfly, there is no symbol in all of nature that can easily represent the metaphor of change, and not just change, transformational change, than the butterfly. That's what most philosophers will use. And Alan is telling us that, look, where we are at today, where we have in the Fourth Republic been managed by the two main parties, MPP and NDC. And this is where we're at. 1. 2, with the clamor that is also emerging for change, obviously you need someone who understands these dynamics and who also believes that such change will be useful for our democratic experience, our economic development, our social development. So then Alan steps forward. And of course, when a person steps into a situation of that nature, you're not going to tell me because the environment looks challenging, so therefore there shouldn't be any venture. That certainly is not Alan Acheampong. That certainly is not people like us. And with the kind of dynamics and vibes that we are also picking across the country, I believe that the significance of Alan Acheampong, and of course, some of the other, if you like, minority, and I would agree because of the statistics,
right,
the numbers, the effect that they are going to make on this particular election is going to be much more significant than in any other election in the past.
Okay.
Already, some of the polls that were giving Alan and the other people about 0.11% about 6 months ago have already begun to assign almost 8%. That's serious for one independent candidate.
For one candidate, right.
For one candidate.
Right.
That is very, very significant. So I think that, yes, it is an uphill task, but there are other factors that some of the experts themselves noted. I read one of the articles, and whilst the writer was taking note of the strength and the entrenchment of the duopoly and the status quo, the writer also noted that 2 factors, name recognition, facial recognition, would play a very major role in this coming election, as tricky as...
And you think that's something that's going to work for you? Name recognition, facial recognition, or face...
Alan Acheampong, I mean, everybody knows that Nana Akufo-Addo has been very popular,
right,
and was popular in all of the elections since 2008. Incidentally, every single village that Nana Akufo-Addo had been to, until Alan left the party, Nana Akufo-Addo had to go with Alan Acheampong. In many cases, Alan Acheampong will be the last person to speak before Nana Akufo-Addo speaks. And there are places where Nana Akufo-Addo will go. If Alan Acheampong doesn't have to be there, the people will be asking, where is Alan Cash? In villages.
Right.
And it's amazing. So if the experts themselves would recognize that the name and the face could be major factors, I think that these are some of the things that make Alan Acheampong's candidature quite significantly different.
Hold it right there for me. Let me bring back Dr. John Osai-Kwapong into the fray, because you have conducted research on this and you've also followed the trends. You look at 2000 and 2004, for example, 2000, the best performance of the minority parties. Are you okay with that? Minority parties. There's a decline of 47% between then and 2004, and then 2008, round 1, minus 50%. You go to 2020, a decline of 60%. In fact, if you put all of that together cumulatively, 20-year period, 2000 to 2020 or 2020, you look at a decline of 93%. This is research that you have done. What do you make of it in respect of what the Ohene Ntows, the Nana Acheampong are saying, that the political parties, the minority parties, could pose a shocker in election 2024? Is it on the cards? Is it in the stars anywhere that this could happen?
So there are a number of structural challenges that the other political parties and independent candidates face when they come up against the dominant ones, or the duopoly, the NDC and the MPP. I recall, I think for the first time last year, I took the opportunity to study the constitutions of the NDC and the MPP. Right. And if you think about the elaborate structures they have set up, all the way from the polling station to the national level, I mean, these are very comprehensive administrative machineries that helps them run the parties nationwide.
Right.
So that was the first thing that dawned on me. And then Nanaya also pointed out the issue of how these parties are also financed. And you realize that to keep and maintain these elaborate structures, it does cost money. So those structural challenges do face these other political parties, that some way, somehow, the two major political parties have found a way to be able to surmount and deal with. If you look at the most recent polling, though, from July, and this is from Global Info Analytics, it puts Mr. Acheampong, and then I can't recall his name, but if you put those two together, and I think one or two other candidates who featured in the poll, they are polling close to 10%, which puts former President John Mahama at 40. I think among committed voters is about 48%, right? So if we go by the most recent poll, then their likely impact is forcing the election, or pushing the election into a second round. Because if you look at the trend in Global Info Analytics, for a while now, the former president was polling above 50%. But in the most recent poll, it's dropped below 50% among likely voters and committed voters. So if there is any potential impact, that potential impact becomes forcing the election into a second round, and then figuring out who they throw their support and weight behind should the election go into a runoff.
Are you saying that is the best possible performance of these smaller parties, that the likelihood of any of these smaller parties polling enough votes to actually not just force a rerun, but actually take the presidential vote is negligible? Is that what you're saying?
In my humble opinion, yes. And the reason I say that too is that even apart from the actual election results, if you go to if you look at the trends over 9 rounds of the Afrobarometer survey, what I find also intriguing is that there's a question that says political parties are divisive, we need fewer of them, versus Ghanaians need more political. Ghana needs more political parties so voters can have a real choice in who governs them.
Right.
Over time, you do see that at least 71 to 75% have regularly said we do need more political parties so we have a real choice in who governs us. But interestingly, in that same Afrobarometer, when respondents are asked which party do you feel close to, it is always at least 95% saying they feel close to either the NDC or the MPP. If you ask about voting intentions, it's at least 90% combined saying they intend to vote NDC or MPP. So I've always found it very interesting reconciling those sentiments that says we want more political parties so we have a real choice, but at the same time, our voting intentions, our partisan expressions, and then our actual election results seem to be at odds with that sentiment.
Doc,
but yes, for me, I think it's forcing it into a opposed to being able to pull off a victory.
I'll put this final bit to you, whether it isn't because I've read some of these polls, and they talk about the fact that people, so to speak, don't want to waste their votes. Sometimes they'll tell you that, look, maybe we believe Alan Kyerematen will be a better leader. Maybe we believe some other candidate will be a better leader. But in terms of the possibility of that person winning, it is pretty low from where we see it. So we'll go for the option that we feel is most likely to win. Not necessarily because that is our preferred candidate, but because it is the candidate that is not the most negative one, but also has the likelihood, apart from that negative one, of winning. That's a trend. And if you look at this, I just want you to respond to this before I come back to Ohene Ntow. If you look at the Global Info Analytics and some of their recent polls, data there suggests that of those sympathetic to the NDC, in their July 2024 poll, 95% of those who said we are NDC and we will vote, 95% of them said they would vote for the former President John Dramani Mahama. 3% said they would vote for Dr. Bawumia, and 1% each said they would vote for Alan Kyerematen and Nana Bediako. But when you come to MPP sympathizers who say we will vote, 88% of them said they would vote for Dr. Bawumia. That's a difference of 7% from the NDC to the NPP. Then those who say they'll vote for the former President John Mahama, 8%, and then 2% saying they'll vote for Mr. Kyerematen, and another 2% for Nana Bediako. When you look at these patterns, these surveys and what they are revealing, does it show in any way that there's hope for the minority parties?
No. And to the original question then of, what is it that motivates the voter who may have a preference for a particular candidate that he or she may feel could be a better president, right? But then in that calculus is their chances of winning. And maybe if they look at the chances of winning, then they decide, I want to vote for a candidate who is likely to win. I mean, in the US, we have that conversations as well, which is the voter doesn't, quote unquote, want to, quote unquote, waste their vote, right? Not in the literal sense, but they want to cast it going into it with the thinking that I am likely voting for a winning candidate. And therefore, that is what drives them to not vote their actual preference, but more of the likelihood of the person that they want to vote for wins. I remember saying that once to a presidential candidate of one of these other parties who took offense, and the response was that, well, if we don't change our mentality and keep saying, well, you're not likely to win, and so I won't vote for you, then that won't happen. That maybe at some point, voters have to also start taking their chances, and that may occasion the change that we want to see in terms of the performance of these other parties outside of NDC and PP.
Right. Let me come into the studio. I know Nanaya has been signaling me, I know, but Nana Ohene Ntow, what is your reflection on that, especially with what Global Info Analytics is saying?
Well, first of all, I am a bit surprised at some aspect of what Info Analytics is talking about in terms of MPP supporters who have decided not to vote for Bawumia, voting for NDC.
Right.
8%
of them.
I will question that because we are also from the same stock. I'm from the MPP stock, and we're also in touch with the party grassroots as we go around.
Right.
Majority of MPP people who would tell you that they will not vote for Bawumia will not tell you that they will vote for John Mahama.
But this is on a national level. They do admit that, like I mentioned to you, in the Ashanti and Eastern regions,
they didn't do.
You have a foothold there. You're going to cause massive problems for the MPP there. But this is on a national level.
Yeah.
And that's a different picture.
But I still, this is my opinion about their poll. But having said that, I don't even think that what Ghana needs in terms of democratic choice and as far as government and presidency is concerned is more of political parties, but a more critical examination of individuals who put themselves up for president. Because you see, we may have political parties that are serving our purposes all right. But we may also have political parties that are not serving our purposes, all of it depending on the individuals that political parties throw up for either parliament or president. And this is one of my favorite examples. One political party, MPP, two different governments, two different leaders, Kufuor and Akufo-Addo, totally different styles of managing both the party and government, totally different outcomes. So you see, what we should begin to address as a nation now, in order to advance the value of our politics and our democracy, is not just to focus on a political party, but the individuals who eventually get voted into office. Because after all, the Constitution of Ghana does not debar independents from getting into parliament or independents becoming president. And of course, in parliament especially, we've seen independents getting into parliament and moving as far as becoming deputy speakers.
When they were
I mean, that was an interesting issue with the Fomena MP.
Not just for Fomena MP,
we knew...
also came as an independent.
Yes,
and then that first deputy speaker. And let me tell you, I haven't done the research yet. We're checking the baseline. But I can tell you, the independents that are going to emerge in 2024 elections, especially in parliament, is going to be phenomenal.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. You can...
In the 2024 elections?
In 2024 elections, the independents that are going to get into parliament is going to be much more than we've ever seen before. Because we are checking certain dynamics on the ground.
All right, so let's mark it down.
Yes.
The independent candidate is going to get into parliament in election 2024.
It's going to be much more than
we've seen before.
More than we've seen before.
Okay.
Much more than we've seen before.
Let's quickly look at this, though.
But quickly, before...
Just to summarize on that point.
Yes.
There are a few other issues I want us to look at before we go. And we are both pressed for time, so let's do this in a... You can just wrap on that.
Yes. So I am saying that possibility of Alan winning. And I'm happy the professor was talking about people talking about wasting their vote. People talk to me, and they say, oh, yeah, we think Mahama, we've had enough of Mahama. Bawumia, 8 years he was in charge of the economy. But is Alan going to win? He would be the best person. And I say, if you vote and I vote for Alan, he's already won. Oh, you're right. I mean, it's just a simple thing. If truly we believe that we're looking for competence, John Mahama's government was accused by the MPP of being incompetent. Today, the NDC is also accusing the current MPP administration as being incompetent. And I read in one of these papers, I think it's today, Bawumia saying that John Mahama should be rejected because he was incompetent. And he himself, Bawumia, is also being charged with incompetence, having been given the power and the authority to run the economy for 8 years. So now the issue...
What do you think? Let me ask you. What do you think? You came from MPP stock. Do you think Dr. Bawumia has been competent?
I think he's totally failed.
Okay.
As the person in charge of the economy. Why? If you took the fundamentals from where you took it, and you were the key driver, now you're saying you need to be giving a steering wheel. You've already been giving a steering wheel for the economy for 8 years. You
took the driver's mate.
Listen, we know the reality. You know the realities. Ghanaians know the realities. When you are campaigning, you will say what you want to say. Ghanaians will also tell you what they think the reality is. Reality is that Nana Akufo-Addo and Bawumia himself told us that if Bawumia is in charge of the economy, Ghanaians will see it. So we can say that Vice President Bawumia has been totally incompetent as far as the fundamentals he inherited and the fundamentals he is bequeathing to Ghanaians at the end of 8 years are concerned.
Okay, hold for me right there. Let me just come to you, Nanaya, on a number of issues. I'm putting them together. But let's start with, you raised the issue of how the political parties, the minority parties, have been treated. Political party funding, what can be done to ensure that the other parties can also get enough to leverage on and really compete toe-to-toe with the two bigger parties? Just briefly on that, please.
Before I continue, I think that His Excellency Bawumia himself has admitted failure.
He has?
Yes, by saying that he's the driver's mate. Because nobody will give their car to a driver's mate to drive. Because a driver's mate has no license.
Oh, okay.
Yes. The driver's mate has no license. So you will not give your vehicle to someone.
But he knows some are actually preparing to drive, so,
so
they secure licenses.
But you have to drive and get tested before you are given.
Yeah, but they can
license.
do that without necessarily
then that is
being
fake.
in charge of that particular vehicle.
But that is fake, because if you have a license and you haven't driven and you're a mate and you are now asking us to give you the steer, then it means that you yourself, you know you're a failure. You know you are not fit for purpose. Do you get me? So
you're saying the vice president is not fit for purpose to become president of Ghana?
Yes, because he has admitted himself, give me the steer. It means you cannot drive. I should give you the steer to drive, and you cannot drive. So if you cannot drive, and you yourself, you admitted you are a mate, it means you cannot move my vehicle to a very, the word is not, safe destination. You are going to crash somewhere, you hit somewhere, because you're a mate who is trying to drive, and you've never held the steer. And if you've never held the steer, how can I give my car to you? You are begging me to give you the steer to drive. How can I give the steer when you have never held it?
Okay.
And you are begging me that me pamochomo first year na mame why. So I will not give my car to you, whether if it's a Honda, whether it is a Datsun, whatever it is, I will not give it to you. The other thing is that the doctor was saying that NDC and NPP have elaborate structures. All the parties have it. It's a prerequisite for you to exist as a party. But the money...
I don't think when he says that, he's just referring to district offices and all that.
No, it's a polling station. Polling... where is it? But you should have a polling...
agents?
Polling station. You have polling station executives. You have your constituency executive. You have everything. Your regional, your everything. The structures are the same. But the difference is that the money, as we come, the money, there should be a framework for even raising funds. I remember those days when even I attempted to raise funds. Some people will tell me that, Nanaya, if it's for your personal use, we'll give it to you. I said, I'm not asking for personal, I don't need it. I need money to run the party. Do you get me? So there should be some framework. There should be some direction.
What framework? The Constitution says something about political parties.
No, that one you cannot do it outside.
But I mean, that has not led to anything.
No, but other political parties should be trained how to go about it. Do you get me? Because for the others, they've been in government before, they've built their base, they built their stakeholders. The possibility of people coming to them because they think that they would come to power. When you talk about the CPP has suffered a lot. Looking at your this thing here, your graph here, everybody here is CPP. Everybody here is Nkrumah's. So granted that Edward Mahama, PNC, Pakwesi Indum, but you don't also have the CPP here. Why? So you see, now you are even discriminating. The CPP stood for elections in 2020. They are not here. But all these people... I
think it's about, we are picking people who secured certain percentages of the vote.
You are discriminating already.
There. So I don't know
0.59%. We did better than 0.59% in 2020. So I am saying that these are
1.32% is there.
But 0.59%, we did better 0.59% in 2020. And in all the years, CPP is nowhere. All the years you have put PNC. PNC doesn't do very well more than us. But when you look at all these, the fragmentation of the Nkrumah's front is something we should look at. Because everybody on your graph here is Nkrumahist. And they are supposed to be members of the CPP. And that is also another matter. You see now there's fragmentation at the end of the MPP. That Alan has left. It's going, you see, always they don't talk about it. The MPP as it stands now, they become very peacocky. Oh, Alan going doesn't matter. But it is going to affect them greatly. Because whenever there's fragmentation, when you put all these percentages together, it is a lot. So granted that all these people are together,
right?
You don't even have APC. They are all Nkrumah's people.
Okay.
So we put it together. We will get a higher percentage than what we are seeing here. Okay. So fragmentation is also an issue.
Right.
But with money, I believe that there should be some framework. There should be something. And we should also build trust. We should build trust among the people who are prepared to help us.
Right.
I always ask the question that where are the children of Nkrumah's ministers? I am one sitting here. Where is number 2 of Botu? Where is number 3 of Koboduse? Where is number 4 of this? Where are they? Us coming together as a group to ensure that we fund. Even Alan sitting there, his father was an Nkrumahist. Some of them have been, Bawumia's father was an Nkrumahist.
Akufo-Addo himself
was an Nkrumahist.
Well, I don't know about Edward Akufo-Addo and whether he was in the sense of being an Nkrumahist.
Yes, was an Nkrumahist. Bawumia's father was an Nkrumahist, a minister. So we see all this fragmentation of the CPP. Granted that John Mahama, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, is a product of Nkrumahist.
That's what this is your discussion.
Yes,
the point is that once NDC became a party, there's no way.
There's no way. And same with the MPP.
My dear, it is not true because even in MPP,
right.
We have CPP. Freddie Blaze works.
Okay. So let's move the conversation forward. It is clear from this angle. Yes. When we get to wrap up, then we'll see where all of this could go. But
infiltration by other parties is also a problem.
I'll stay with you, but let me just ask this question, lest I forget. No, Ohene Ntow. So you are saying, per the permutations you were giving us, are you saying that as far as Alan is concerned, you are not merely trying to make a runoff impact, but you are trying to win the presidency?
Exactly.
That you believe Alan Kyerematen can win the 2024 elections? No, just clarify. I don't need an explanation.
Exactly.
Just clarify that for me.
Otherwise, why would you want to waste your time?
All right.
So much
thank you very much.
You see how, even in statistical terms,
right,
the drop of the percentage of the smaller parties took such a sharp 90-something%.
Right.
In statistics, normally that should not be possible. But it did happen.
Okay.
So if an upswing of some 90-something% also happens, I don't think it would also be surprising. And it shouldn't also surprise the statisticians. But in this case, there are so many other dynamics that are at play today, which were not at play to the same extent 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, as far as the role of an independent person to parliament or an independent person to president was concerned.
All right.
I think the situation is quite significantly different from a couple of years back.
Nanaya, let me start with you on the Airbus angle. We just have a few more angles to go. In fact, let me start with the apology angle. The finance minister, Dr. Amin Adam, has come through in recent times. You remember there was Kweku Kwarteng talking about the fact that we have managed the economy like a Ponzi scheme, and we have to, there are certain things we have to do so as not to lose the people. Then you have the Asin Central legislator, Kennedy Acheampong, come and say that we have to apologize to the people. Then, not long after that, you have Dr. Amin Adam, the finance minister, come and say, we apologize to you. No government wants to make things hard for the citizenry. You would even hear the Attorney General come through and say that, oh, we are breaking the 8. And breaking the 8 is not for selfish reasons. We are not trying to break the 8 for selfish reasons. All of that has come through. On the bit about the apology, though, what is the worth of an apology? And from where you sit, politically, what impact could it make for the MPP in the 2024 elections? Let's dwell briefly on that. I want to give each of you bite-sized time.
2008, they apologized and they lost. You remember?
Under Kufuor, yes.
Yes, under Kufuor. Yeah. So the point is that apology for what? What have you done wrong? You have to tell me what you've done to me that you're apologizing. And if it is worth apologizing at this dire minute. You see, when you wrong somebody and you need something from that person and you go and apologize, it means that it is not real. It is just orchestrated. They've sat down, thought about it. You see, I always say that these MPP people, they treat us as they are political playboys, where when they meet you, they tell you things that they don't even mean. When you meet a playboy, he tells you things that he doesn't mean. He just wants to woo you. And that is what they are doing. They want to break the 8 for their own selfish means. We are saying we do not want them. They should go. Why do they want to go? What is it that they are saying that they are going to break the 8? We are saying you haven't done. You are apologizing because you have done something wrong. You don't apologize in a vacuum. Because you have done something wrong, you are apologizing. Can your apology bring the 22 people who died because there was no dialysis services at Kolebu? 4 million cedis they had to go and pay and they didn't pay. Meanwhile, they used more than that for Bawumia's campaign. Do you get me? And that young lady who was only 18 years died. Can you apologize for that? Can you apologize for the old people who have died because their money, you have taken their money and you are not able to give it to them? An old doctor, an old man, a doctor who died, he was on dialysis, he couldn't pay for dialysis and he died. Can you apologize for that? Do you get me? So it is even an insult for them to come and say they are apologizing. What they would do to satisfy our heart is to just go quietly and not try to orchestrate or try to manipulate the electoral process.
I see.
Because you only apologize to somebody you have hurt. And they have hurt us so deeply that we cannot just say that, yes, we can forgive them, but we cannot forget what they have done. Apologizing doesn't mean we are going to vote for them. Apologizing doesn't mean that we accept what they do. Me, I wouldn't even say that they are incompetent. Their feet is quick to do evil.
Their feet are quick to do evil.
Yes, their feet
okay.
quick to do evil.
So hold for me there. It is clear that you are not accepting any such apology. Dr. Kwapong, Osai Kwapong, are you accepting their apology? What is the worth of an apology at this time?
You know, to render an apology means there's an admission that you've done something wrong. If you even listen to what the Honorable Finance Minister said, I've been asking myself that it was preceded by also giving praise, particularly to the debt exchange program, right?
Yeah.
And also saying that it was one of the, I can't remember the exact name, but essentially was saying good policy, it was a great achievement.
That it was one of the most successful in terms of acceptance rate, participation, and all of that.
Precisely. So for me to have prefaced that we didn't intend to put hardships on you, please forgive us, just on the back of the very thing that caused some of those hardships and economic pinch points, then I don't see how you're rendering an apology, right? I mean, it's like me, Benja, and I'll never do this, right? But it's just like me slapping you and I say, hey, Sutrobi pa me ball Ben. And then I come and say, oh, but Ben, Sutrobi my ball pa, but fache me. I mean, it doesn't for me come off as a very genuine kind of apology. It just seems to me that the moment that conversation came up where the Honorable Kennedy Acheampong said, you know, we should go to the grassroots, maybe we should ask for forgiveness. I just felt, in my opinion, it feels like a politically calculated apology.
Okay, knee-jerk reaction.
Ben, just
Ohene Ntow, very quickly.
Just a second. Right. You know, when he was even giving the apology, which was an afterthought, he was laughing.
Okay.
Yes.
So his demeanor, the finance minister's demeanor, did not.
He was laughing and he said, "Oh, we apologize." And I mean, it is a clear afterthought.
I see.
Clear afterthought, which.
But he wasn't laughing throughout.
For that moment that he was speaking, he was laughing, as if that, oh yes, we apologize. Oh, they said we should do it.
Okay. Now, Ohene Ntow.
Yes.
The pensioner bondholders leader, Dr. Edu Anani Entry. Last time he had a conversation with us and he said something. I can say oh, I've hit you, like he said. You have a sore there. Oh, sorry. It doesn't kill the sore. Is an apology worth it in this instance?
This is, and I'll be very, very harsh here. Some of the most useless and unproductive political gimmick that I have seen in my life. Because, you see, President Akufo-Addo was the one who said that John Mahama's administration was so bad, they should just apologize and resign. That's what he said before 2016. I have the video right here.
Oh, we all know of that.
Yes. They should not just apologize, but apologize and resign.
And pack out.
And pack out.
Right.
Which sent a signal that he said, if it were me, if I were the one in this kind of situation.
Indeed.
And now he is the one in a situation. And his government is apologizing for taking the monies of pensioners to to pay public debt so that what happens to them? People have struggled, lived all their lives and worked. You don't even know whether the pension is adequate or not. And then the government decides that largely because a lot of these debts have come about by what some people perceive to be largely corruption and mismanagement and irregularities of handling public resources. And then individuals, innocent citizens, suffer. Now we are in this kind of economic situation, and the finance minister comes to render an apology and is still in place. He is still in position. He hasn't resigned. The president hasn't resigned. The government hasn't resigned. So then Nana Aya's issue comes in. These are people who are just playing games with everybody's life and think that it is their right to continue to stay in power.
Of kings.
Yes, it is their right to continue to stay in power. When the issues around this mysterious Japadia document came up, the president has spoken to it, the Ohene has spoken to it, Gabi, some other people have spoken to it. This is fake, this is non-existent. But everything in that document has been implemented by the government, To
the letter.
And they haven't apologized. They are rather insulting people. They are insulting the people who have chosen to question this mysterious document and how come almost all of it got implemented to certain details which will shock everybody. And then the key people in government and some people who appear to be connected to this document are insulting everybody, saying people even have to get their hairs examined if they believe. Look, I believe in the Bible. I don't know who wrote the Bible, but I read the principles of the Bible, and I decided that these are good principles, and I believe them.
So you also believe you believe what's in the Japadia document?
Of course.
Who doesn't believe
from the implementation? You see, it is not a question of I believe or I don't believe. Has it been implemented to the letter? These are the things that the people who clearly are connected or appear to be connected should be apologizing, because it has really affected the whole body politic.
Right.
How governance has gone, especially in the last 8 years.
Okay.
You know, when you talk about apologies,
right,
it sounds like let's just blow a little cool air around their heads. And as usual, Ghanaians being who they are, they will just forget whatever the issues are. Right. Then we'll keep going business as usual.
So
I think it is really
so let's move the conversation forward.
For
just to conclude on these two issues.
Made.
I want us to make enough time, maybe just to talk about Bryan Acheampong, his recent utterances as well. But I want us to first look at the Airbus saga, the OSP's, ruling on it, if you want to call it that, and the whole bit about conflict of interest. The OSP confirms that the former President Mahama is government official one, but he says he was clean. There was nothing he got involved in. But he probably should not have put himself front and center of some of those discussions like he did. Sami Jemfi, National Communications Officer of the NDC, came here and explained that, no, it was because of his role at the time, which is why he did that, and that he had no interest in it. But do you feel there was conflict of interest? And what could be the lessons for future leaders of our country moving forward? That same question to each of you, 1 minute each on that. I want us to conclude on Bryan Acheampong, starting with you, Nanaya. 1 minute. Sima Wakope, Mr.
Hey, you want me 1 minute? Oh, my uncle, you so much time.
We dey want to tougher.
No. You see, the point I wanted to say something little. You see, after what is his name? Amin has apologized. He immediately went back and said that government is going to use 50 billion cedis pension fund to build roads. So is this somebody who is apologetic?
Okay, point made.
You see, the point is that this Airbus thing, I don't understand. What is the conflict of interest? That a president sat in a discussion because he wanted to be sure that the right thing is being done. I think those aircrafts, they were for the army, isn't it?
Yes.
So if he wants to sit in and find out what is going on. I worked with His Excellency John Dramani Mahama at the PURC. He's a hands-on person. Do you understand? Our office was under the office of the president. He does not interfere at all, but he's a hands-on person. he will ask questions. He wants to know what it is so that he can maybe no mistakes are done or minimal mistakes as much as possible. So I do not understand what anybody is talking about. Was it conflict of interest when Data Bank was transaction advisor for all the loans we took on the market? Was it conflict of interest? Is it conflict of interest that the enterprise insurance is insuring all government properties, even those abroad? I mean, it's there. SIC is complaining that enterprise insurance has taken over the market. Is that conflict of interest? Because everybody knows who owns these two entities. Was it conflict of interest? When we talked about it and it went to the ad hoc committee, it came out that it wasn't conflict of interest. So what is conflict of interest? Is somebody who is a president sits in a meeting and be part of a discussion.
In fact, from the time he was vice, where he would have direct oversight.
Oversight, yes.
And to becoming president. So from where you sit, there was no conflict of interest.
I do not think
there's no debate there.
But you see, the amount, somebody has done 35 million ambulance repair scandal. And this is 5 million Airbus. And we are leaving the 35 million and talking about 5 million.
We've spoken extensively on that. Dr. Ohene Ntow, conflict of interest or not?
Let me answer it this way. The appearance, and remember we've talked about this on your show a few times, the legal test versus the appearance test. And I continue to say that what always gets our public officials in trouble is that they are not very sensitive when it comes to the appearance test.
The optics.
Right? Exactly. And that for me is what always creates the problems for them. Right? This, I mean, and as the OSP notes, even with your good intentions, this, and I believe that this placed you in a potential situation of a conflict of interest. And I think if our public officials could be a little more sensitive to say that, yes, my intentions are clean, I am not engaged in anything untoward. However, this may look improper in the eyes of Ghanaians, and therefore I have to draw the line, and I have to encourage my friends and my families to also draw the line in certain dealings with the state if I'm in a certain kind of a position to make a certain kind of a decision. But I also acknowledge that the Ghanaian context seems to be very, very, very different, right? I mean, I live and work in a context where the kinds of things I have to disclose because I work for a public university. It's amazing. And it's always because our legal counsels always say to us that we just don't want anybody to even have the occasion to say, this just doesn't look good, even if there's nothing untoward that you are engaged in. And that for me is what I encourage our public officials to become a little more sensitive to.
All right. Thank you for that quick response. Your thinking on that?
I will not depart so radically from what the professor is saying. But you see, there is the legal side of issues which you cannot contest. Once the law says A and the evidence is there or not there, then that is it. But
the SFO cleared him. Yes, the OSP has cleared him.
Conflict of interest is not
we
legal.
also know
there
are ethical and moral issues that also rule society. Now, when you look at the report, paragraph 6, between paragraph 6, 9, and 10.
Right.
10 especially, 6, 10 especially says, then again, the direct participation of the president and the vice president on behalf of the Republic in commercial communications and meetings with commercial entities should not be encouraged.
Right. Sami James came here and mentioned that because he was vice president at a point, and you know what role he plays in respect of the armed forces. That was why he played those roles.
It still doesn't deal with the issues of morality, the issues of ethics, and so on. And now, even when you go a little further down, it says that, indeed, it seems to OSP, that is 611, that the only reasons why the Airbus Ghana deal found its way into the UK, US DPSAs were the fact that former President Mahama and Samuel Adam Foster were brothers of full blood, and that former president directly participated in commercial communications.
In other words, this would not have been an issue
No.
at all because
Yes,
there's nothing really
once
in
the
there.
government-
But apart from
but the point
the
is that
relationship.
the government takes a decision that it needs this equipment.
Right.
The supplier is Airbus, the manufacturer is Airbus. The supplier is the president's brother. So the government puts out a request for a tender. I guess, I don't know, some of these things may or may not go through a tender. Doesn't matter.
It has to go through a tender.
It depends. It depends.
International competitive bidding.
Yeah. So whatever the processes are, a supplier is selected. So now, the commercial communication between the supplier and the manufacturer becomes a matter of, money issues.
So better,
Those are the
it
things
could have been
that
handled better
if
for the sake
the
of time.
president is seen to be involved, clearly people may ask
It could have been
questions.
handled better. But a
Exactly.
quick point that has to be
Exactly.
made is that Samuel Mahama only comes in after the deal has been concluded. He is not a part of the initial deal.
nobody raises
He comes in. No, just to clarify, because that also came up the last time.
Yeah, it's in the
he only
report.
comes in
Because Ben,
after the deal has been concluded between the government of Ghana and Airbus. So the bit about he's his brother and all of that
see,
does not even come to
Ben,
play as far as that is
disagree
concerned.
with.
But can we move on to the last
I
issue?
want us to just a minute. I disagree with Nana and the Prof. You see, you need tomorrow. If this thing, the price was bloated and all that, which name would they have mentioned? That the when Mahama was vice, when Mahama was this. I mean, commercial arrangements. It can even include the technical specifications. What are you bringing to us? So I do not think that it is wrong. Tomorrow,
if you want to go into detail, you see those things.
Tomorrow,
I don't think.
Please let her make a point. So I want us to conclude on the final issue.
Tomorrow, if Alan becomes president and he has to buy something, or my flag bearer becomes president and has to buy something for the nation, and the person is involved in the conversation around the purchase, I don't see that one.
Will it be treated the same
Yes,
way?
because
And would it be right?
I am saying that is there any law which says that you cannot? When Ken's thing happened, they said even the conflict. They said it's ethical. No, but this one, he was in an activity that it was bringing him money. This one was just involved to make sure that something is right.
So
Yes.
right or wrong, I think there are lessons therein for everybody.
Yeah.
But here's something else. I want us to watch these videos and situate the conversation. While some say apologize, others are also going to certain parts of the country and saying different things. Let's listen to Dr. Bryan Acheampong, the Agric Minister, on that campaign platform recently.
NDC for Pell, Amu Pell, 2024 Abano, and Yadoma win it da.
Whether the NDC likes it or not, they will never win the 2024 election. They will never win. Go and check their record. They won't win. The MPP is bound to win the election.
Na MPP Amano Kono. MPP Amano Kono. Yes, you say you win the election. MPP. Yes, you say you win the election. It's the enemy. Quite be asked why you win the 2024 Amano.
We will use any means to win the election. We have pastors, imams, even traditionalists. If you don't understand, go and bend the sea. We will win this election at all costs, so we can continue the good works of TPP.
You just stood at the corner, and when he was about to take the hotels, we said, hi, you never will. And you just say you will not hand over power to President Mahama. I have a message for him. On the 9th of December, inshallah, if the good people vote for Mahama and your MPs, if he's a man, if he's a man, if he's a man, he should not hand over power and see. We will show him that when iron and iron meet, you will see fire.
We definitely don't want any sparks in the country, no fire, but I guess the rhetoric is creating problems. Doc, I'll start with you. This is not the first time we've heard Bryan Acheampong go on this trajectory. and he's getting even more forceful in some of this rhetoric. What do you make of it? How inflammable or inflammatory is his language? And should he stop this kind of narrative? What do you think?
Yes, I understand the passion, the excitement, in the middle of a campaign, all of that. Our emotions sometimes get the better part of us. But I also, in particular, worry about the rhetoric, right? That you ought to find a way to manage your political temperaments in such a way that you don't end up using the kind of language that you never know who in your party or who among your supporters may want to activate that and give it a literal interpretation.
Okay.
As I said yesterday on TV3, part of me, you want to sort of appeal to his better angels and say, no malice intended. But when similar statements have been made in the past that were roundly condemned, and then you have this again, you start getting, at least personally, I start getting worried about keeping our political temperaments in check. It's an election.
Right.
Yes, elections do have consequences, but it's an election. It's not a matter of life and death that we have to ratchet it up with this kind of rhetoric.
Okay. Just give me a yes or no answer. That's the final batch of the conversation. Should Bryan Acheampong be apologizing for some of these statements? Yes or no?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Okay. This is the final batch, so just about a minute and a half for you each. Nana Ohene Ntow, on this rhetoric and maybe whether he should be apologizing.
Obviously, he is not the only one in MPP or NDC who's been talking like this. And anytime someone in MPP talks like this, you get...
Now, the NDC hasn't said it will not... they are saying they will not hand over power if they lost.
Yes,
or whatever the situation, or that they will not even
these
lose.
Things have kept coming and going. And now, Bryan Acheampong makes this kind of very, very inflammatory statement. I don't think an apology is enough because, you see, these things reflect a certain kind of mindset. These are people who are leading a whole political party. And incidentally, they happen to be incumbent in government with all of the state resources available to them. We saw what happened in one of the by-elections where some of the actors, including the same Bryan Acheampong, was reported to have acted in ways that compromised the safety or supposed to have compromised the safety of people.
Okay.
And now he's emboldened to say more of such things. It is not a question of apology. And finally, this brings into very sharp focus
Final point.
the extent to which this entrenched duopoly MPP-NDC has taken the people of Ghana for granted, because the picture is like, whichever way you look at it, come an election, 4-year, 8-year, it will be either us or them.
Okay.
And
all right.
this is the time that the narrative has to change,
all right.
and every Ghanaian has to be concerned. You need people with the kind of temperament that will be good for national unity, cohesion, and for a forward march of our country in peace. Not in
Ben,
pieces.
you know what?
You have a minute.
I have a minute and a half. You see, this is very unfortunate, and it should not be acceptable. I said before that the man, when he gets on stage, he gets intoxicated with emotion and excitement. Do you get me? So when it happens like that, he just talks anyhow, without even thinking about the implications of whatever he says. I think a time has come for somebody to really check Bryan when he is on stage, because it is whatever he's doing. This is not the first time he has done it. He has done it before, and he's repeating it. And he said, you see, in a camp, if you say kokoshepo, it's a great insult. It is more than an insult. It means that the person that you are dealing with is a non-entity. It is like a Jamaican tell you, get the gun. And that is exactly what MPP and their cohorts are telling us. That we should just get away. They don't care. If you don't agree that they have made this country so hard, they have made, this country ungovernable, there is a state capture, they have stolen our money, stolen our properties. They want to tell us that we should just get away. You should go and bend the sea. They don't care. And this is what it is. I believe that this is a cue for every Ghanaian. For me, if my party wins, it is great. If another party wins, it is okay. But all we have to do is to make sure that these MPP people be kicked out. They should be kicked out because they are not, you see, they are not useful. Then they are not useful. They can't do anything for us. They have gotten to a point where they have become rotten. And when something is rotten, what do? You put it in a garbage and you throw it out. If not for that reason, why should Bryan tell us,
Okay. No.
Ghanaians,
Right.
Why should he say that to us?
Right.
Because we go and queue and vote for it. It is we as Ghanaians who went to the polls to go and vote for you to today to be a minister of agric.
Right. So point made. Now, Hinto, I wouldn't have come back to you, but I just have to make this final point. Do you feel this has the propensity to stoke violence, the rhetoric of Bryan Acheampong? Does it have the propensity?
It does. It does. It does. You see, because when people like Bryan are being seen as champions in their party, and apparently is quite liberal with some of the people he works with.
He's frivolous.
And he, when people like Bryan are taking care of you and then they give you this kind of a command or an encouragement, the tendency is that people who feed from his hands will just follow it.
It's only the people, everybody, the grassroots.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's a cue.
It's something that should not be encouraged.
Okay.
It should be condemned, in fact. And characters like that should not be honored with public service and positions of leadership. They should not be honored. It is unfortunate, as far as I'm concerned, that somebody with that kind of mentality, and he keeps repeating it, because he has money, he can buy the vote, he can buy voters. It's unfortunate. But this kind of language is not what Ghana needs. It is very, very negative and destructive.
Ben, let me...
Thank you. Nanaya, we have to go. Nanaya.
I have to give them some. Their colors are... He's talking about their colors. But their colors, you see, they have an orange here. They have a bright yellow there. I think that they should start synchronizing colors.
They should synchronize their colors.
They should come...
Just take that as feedback. No more responses. So those who joined us for this conversation, we had Nanaya Acheampong, a former General Secretary of the CPP. We also had Nana Ohene Ntow. He is Senior Advisor to Alan Kojo Trematin. And we had Dr. John Osai Kwapong, a CDD Fellow. They joined us for this conversation. Stay with us. Up next, we have still more conversations bringing your way or coming your way on the AM show. We'll be right back.
Why don't you participate? It would be an exciting time of networking, music, learning, and empowerment. Registration or